All right. I've never thought about how to start this. Should we say hi?
Yeah. Okay, wait.
Okay.
Yeah, we can just say, like, you want to say, like, oh, yeah, we can. I didn't have to roll.
Hi, I'm Kenneth.
And I'm Maya. Welcome to Journey to the Double Doc. We are incoming MD PhD students at Penn and Harvard MIT, and we wanted to create this channel to chronicle our training paths.
We hope to share things that we learned along the way that we wish we had known, as well just as to be a general resource for those interested and passionate about science and medicine. So feel free to contact us at our Twitter handles or our email. We would love to hear what you want us to talk about, and so welcome to our channel and hope you will join us on our journey. I was like...
And I was like, oh my god, like, why are you talking about this? Is like your first impression.
Hi, everyone. Hope everyone's been doing well as much as they can be. So recently I wrapped up interviewing MD applicants here at Penn, and I thought it would be a great opportunity for me to discuss now that I've seen it from the other side, what kind of tips we can now impart having interviewed applicants.
What do you think, like, so I'm just curious, like, how exactly does, like, interviewing applicants go? And, like, what's one thing that probably surprised you the most, like, now that you're reflecting on your whole season as an interviewer?
So at Penn, there is a faculty interviewer and a student interviewer. Obviously, I was a student interviewer. It is open file except for MCAT and GPA scores. And there are a number of questions that we are asked to reflect on about the applicant after the interview. But other than that, it's pretty much an open conversation that the interviewer engages with the applicant. I think the thing that has been most surprising is how varied an open format interview can be from interviewee to interviewee. The things that we talked about and the directions we go can be so different. That's not to say that I necessarily have a good or bad opinion about this kind of interview format, because at the end of the day, I think that it did give me a lot of opportunity to get to know the person I was interviewing, but also gave me a lot of space to ask them to share what they wanted me to know about them. And so I was really happy that I was able to just have such a great set of conversations about all various different kind of things across applicants. And it gave me really a chance to know them in ways that I would not have expected to be able to get to know them.
I think that's great, and I definitely a good reminder, because I feel like it's easy to go into interviews and be like, okay, like, this interviewer has an agenda and they want to know X, Y, Z, and I guess occasionally you'll run across that experience, but I think it is very true that interviews tend to be a lot more flexible than maybe what you think going into them. Yeah.
I have to confess, I do have an agenda. I do want to know why you want to go into medicine, how you thought about medicine, extensive from that, among other things. But at the core, that's a ground level that I hope to establish and learn from each applicant beyond their application. With that basic framework, there is a lot of flexibility and great opportunity to get to know people.
I'm curious. Actually, that's one thing I've always been curious about. Like, how different do you think people's answers are to, like, why medicine, and, like, kind of these, like, questions that you always hear people should prep for interviews? Because I always feel like ultimately, like, a lot of the reasons why we go into medicine are very true, but also very similar. So I'm curious, like, how differentiable do you think that is?
Yeah, I actually will confess that that's not something that I felt as a differentiator, a person's why medicine. I think that it's, like you said, it can be very similar across many people. And so it's not very useful for when I want to write to the AdCom and make the case that this is great because of X, Y, and Z. Rather, I'm more interested in how that motivation has evolved across different experiences. How did being an EMT change that motivation for medicine? How did exposure to this specialty, whether it be through shadowing or whatnot, what did that tell you about medicine, and how did that make you reframe or reposition how you thought about yourself in medicine? And so that's where I found successful applicants, in the sense that I was able to, at the end of the day, just write more compellingly about applicants who told me about how different experiences led to different insights and motivated them slightly differently and motivated them more in whichever way.
I think that's true. I think, yeah, I guess ultimately, like, so much of interviews is trying to understand not necessarily what people did. Well, I mean, that's definitely part of it, but more so like why they did it and like kind of
Yeah.
like the the different events that connect it. Because like I know one thing that I feel like is like when you go into interviews, you tend to think of your, what you want to say is like kind of like steps along like a stepping stone or whatever, but you realize it's really more focused on kind of like the journey between it. And I think that's really cool that you get to kind of be a part of that and hear about people's different motivations.
And the application has most of the dots there of that path, and most interviewers will be able to trace that, you know what, like, or sorry, like this person like was here and then did this and this. What we really want to hear is and understand is that context between those dots, like connect the dots for us in the interview. We know all these basic parts of why you want to become a doctor and whatnot, but help us understand on a deeper level how you got there and like why each steps reaffirmed it, or were there times where your desire was shaken, and like why was it so, and how did your passion for medicine recover from that? I think those things are very valuable, especially for me as an MD PhD, knowing how long I will be here in school. And so those are things I think that I value when interviewing an applicant.
Yeah. That's really good advice. Do you think like so beyond kind of reflecting on your own story and like the kind of connections between the dots in preparing for interviews, do you think there's anything that like now after interviewing a bunch of people you would kind of give as advice for how people should approach preparing for interviews?
Interviewers should read your application. You've put in a lot of work into perfecting every sentence, every character to get it under the character limit. It
So
Out
true.
of decency, please, interviewers, read the damn application. But if when the interviewer has read the application, be ready to bring more than just the application to the interview. Oftentimes, when I review the application before the interview happens, I'm trying, I just am interested in hearing about more about this experience this person had, hearing more about this hobby that this person has. And so come in with the mindset that the interviewer has read the application and they're going to want to have a conversation about things beyond what's been said in the application. And so, one goal you can have in mind when entering the interview is what is something, or what are things that I have not yet been able to communicate on my application that I want the interviewer to walk away and write to the AdCom about. And I open and close every interview that I do with, please, if there's something that you have not had a chance yet to say in your application, do it now. Or at the end, I say, if there's something that we didn't get to in our conversation, like this is a great time for you to mention it so I know. And so thinking about at the end of the day, it's hard because you do have to guard against the people who didn't read your application. But so the tell me about yourself should be a quick summary paragraph that at a very high level communicates all the interviewer needs to know, but sets a foundation for you to build on for the rest of the interview.
That's great advice. Honestly, probably advice that I will also use as I think about future interviews to approach for myself. Of course, hit on stuff that you discuss in your application because, of course, that is important to you and that's why you wrote about it. But making sure it's not just basically what the person could get from rereading your application in the 30 minutes that you're interviewing with them.
Yeah, I totally agree. And this is hard, but don't be nervous. I think that it's just easier for me to have some contagious enthusiasm when you're excited to have this conversation. So it makes me excited to have the conversation. and it will just generally leave a better impression of the interview in my mind um, than if it were the case. And I know that's super hard advice, and that probably will probably only come with practice. So practice the interview so you can speak with excitement and passion about the things that you've written about.
I think that's great advice. I think I've said this before, but like I really think like when you're getting interviewed, they just want to understand like what would you be like on a normal day at the medical school. And I think it's important that you're able to project that real version of yourself instead of just someone who's nervous and anxious and probably not acting like what you're going to act like on a normal day in lecture at 11 a.m. when you're surrounded by your classmates and excited about what you're learning and potential research and everything.
Totally agree. Totally agree. And I think that it's incumbent upon the interviewer to also make sure that the tone is friendly, open, inviting for that conversation to happen. And I hope that all my interviewees felt that when I interviewed them. I really do. And so, um, yeah,
Great.
that's important.
Well, I think these are some great tips that you've gotten, and it sounds like you had a really good experience doing interviewing. So I'm excited to kind of see where some of the people we've talked to will end up sort of now that the interview process is wrapped up.
For sure. And I um, think that once you're on the other side and have the chance to interview, you should definitely do it because I think it allows you to reflect on, because the immediate comparison for me was how did I do on my interviews, and and it wasn't stellar. And so I think that it also identified rooms where I could improve, most specifically expanding beyond what I've said in my application, filling in, giving more context, being less nervous. And those are things moving forward that I think that I will keep with me in approaching different and approaching interviews in the future.
Well, I think that's very true. And also it shows that like you don't have to be a perfect interviewer to get into amazing schools and to get into programs that you love. So ultimately it's going to be about fit and authenticity. But it's always great, I think, to think about how we can improve. So I definitely am going to be reflecting on these tips because I know I also have a long way to go in these processes.
Yeah.
Great. Well, if you have any interview tips that you think we didn't hit on that you found really helpful, feel free to drop them in the comments. And otherwise, we'll catch you on the flip side.
See ya.
Bye.